Hey gaming fans, so today I'm going to be doing another card kind of discussion, and this is about negation traps in GOAT format for Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I pulled out all the ones that I think are pretty relevant. There might be like a one or two missing, I think, but anyways, let's start with the most obvious one, and that is Solemn Judgment. This card is used pretty much in like modern Yu-Gi-Oh, like today's standard Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's also used in GOAT format. The question is, what types of decks would you use it in? Or is it a generic, put it in every kind of deck? I don't know if it's really necessarily a staple card, because I don't always see it in every single deck list, but it is a good card that can stop anything. Now, obviously, it has to have a drawback, and that is half your life points. So that is a big thing in especially in GOAT format, where games tend to go on for very long. There's lots of turns. It's not like modern Yu-Gi-Oh, where games are over in like the second turn or maybe the third. So life points kind of do matter. And depending on what you're facing, obviously, if you're facing up against a burn deck, you're probably not going to want to be using Solemn Judgment. But if you're facing up against an aggro deck where you do need to stop something, or, back row heavy, you do kind of need to stop stuff. The best probably decks you could play this in would be ones where you yourself are trying to stall. You play Messenger of Peace, or you have a lot of back row. You just don't want that heavy storm to ruin your day, or maybe even a Chaos Monster or a Nobleman of Crossout. So obviously the most generic one, probably the best one. You could always activate it. You'll always have life points, so really good card all around. The next one I want to talk about here is Magic Jammer. Now, I remember when this came out, it was kind of like your generic counter a spell, pretty much, if you've played Magic the Gathering. And I remember, like, at the time, I was heavily into Magic, and, seeing a card like Magic Jammer, to me, just brought back memories of Counterspell. But this trap actually is pretty decent. The problem is you have to discard a card to negate a spell. So in most cases, unless that spell card is going to wipe out your entire back row, you're going to get a neg 1 off of this one. You're going to get a -1 because you're using 2 cards to stop 1. However, I mean, that goes to say, if that one card, say a Snatch Deal, was going to grab your biggest monster and win your opponent the game, it might be worth it. Now, the problem also with this card is if you don't have any cards in your hand, it's useless. So if you draw this card as a top deck and it's the only card you have, it's useless. You have to set it. Then you have to wait till your next draw just to get a card to discard for it, and then you still have no plays. So, I mean, you can run into problems. Sinister Serpent would probably be your best friend with this. Other than that, it's pretty generic spell negation. So to kind of get rid of that discard, they came up with Magic Drain, which also, it's pretty good in certain situations. Your opponent can actually stop this card, though, and I'm not a big fan of any card that has a piece of text on there that allows your opponent to pretty much negate the card itself, because all they have to do is discard a spell card. In most cases, your opponent probably will have a spell card that they can discard. Whether that's going to hurt them or not, I don't know. And in most cases, you probably want your negation to go off. That's why you're activating the trap. You're really hoping to stop that Heavy Storm, or stop that Nobleman of Crossout, or Monster Reborn, or something, something that's going to go off that you don't want to see go off. So in most cases, I find this card could be a little bit irritating, that you just never know when it's going to happen. I think it's used in some decks. If you're playing like a discard deck, if you're playing cards like Drop Off and Dawn Zalug, maybe even Thessalos, if you're discarding cards out of their hand, this actually does become pretty handy, and it could stop, some pretty critical plays, like a Pot of Greed, for instance. Then we go on to Spell Vanishing, which I don't think anybody ever really played because of the heavy discard cost. You have to discard 2 cards from your hand, negate the activation of a spell card, and destroy it. So it's pretty much Magic Jammer, but it does have this extra, also look at your opponent's hand and deck, and if you find any spell cards of the same name as the destroyed spell card, send all copies to the graveyard. So very specialized kind of trap. I mean, there's already one that's very similar to it, which I'll get to in a second. But this one, it's kind of slow. It's kind of, I don't know if anybody would really want to play this. And I don't know if like 3 of a specific spell you'd be that terrified of. Maybe scapegoats. Other than that, I mean, most of the spells people play in a deck, they only play like 1 or maybe 2 copies. In most cases, those cards are probably only limited to 1 anyways, so I don't think this card will ever really see play. But Cursed Seal of the Forbidden Spell, now this is a different story. You have to discard a spell card instead of just any card, so it kind of is not good for Serpent plays. You're not going to be able to discard a Serpent like you can with Magic Jammer, but, I mean, at the same time, you discard a spell from your hand to negate the activation of an effect of a spell card. If only if it was a spell or monster or effect or a trap, it would be even better. But it's just spell card, and your opponent cannot activate spell cards on the same name, including the one that's destroyed by this effect, for the rest of this duel. So again, much like the spell Vanishing, this is obviously a much better version of it. All you have to have is a spell card in your hand, and now your opponent can no longer play that specific spell for the rest of the game. So that even includes when they activate Magician of Faith and return that spell to their hand, they cannot activate it. So I guess it could cripple your opponent's strategies depending on what they're playing. However, always having to discard a spell is a downside. The Spell Shield Type 8 is similar also to the Cursed of the Forbidden Spell, in that you also need to discard a spell card to activate it, only for the second effect. So the first effect, you don't need any cost. You just negate the activation of an effect of a spell card that targets one monster on the field and destroy that spell card. I'm actually starting to like this card a little bit more, and I'm trying to start putting it in more decks myself. Because if you think about the amount of cards you can stop with this without having to pay the activation cost, cards like Nobleman of Crossout, cards like Snatch Steal, Brain Control, any spell card that targets, you can stop without actually having to pay any cost. And then on top of it, if you do have a spell card in your hand, you can stop any spell. So I think that this is, worth at least giving 1 or 2 in your deck a try, especially if you're going to go a lot of face-down cards, face-down monster cards, because oftentimes those do get Nobleman of Crossout, so you can actually stop that with this card. Then we have Curse of Royal, a card that I remember when it first came out, I actually thought it was pretty decent, but then I realized how limited it is. So you negate the activation and effect of a spell or trap card that includes the effect of destroying one spell or trap on the field. So basically, it doesn't work against Heavy Storm. It's okay, I guess, if you know your opponent's playing like 3 Dust Tornadoes, or the 1 Mystical Space Typhoon. I just don't like it that it's very specific and only stops something that destroys 1 card. A little bit limiting. Maybe a good side card, put it in your side deck if your opponent is playing a lot of Dust Tornadoes. It might help, but I would personally just rather run Dust Tornado and try and stop that in the end phase. So let's move on to some monster negation now. Divine Wrath is a card I've played a little bit in the past. It's also an interesting card. It's much like Magic Jammer. You have to discard a card from your hand, negate the activation and effect of an effect monster, and destroy that monster. So in GOAT format currently, as of today anyways, Chaos seems to be reigning supreme, and there's reasons why cards like Bottomless Trap Hole or the original Trap Hole aren't as great, because when your opponent summons the monster, they get priority, because that's a thing in GOAT format, and they can actually activate the effect before your Bottomless Trap Hole will do anything. So Divine Wrath can actually step in and take over, actually negating the effect and destroying the monster. Again, discarding a Sinister Serpent is your friend, or your Thunder Dragons or whatever, but it's just good surprise, kind of stop an opponent's effect from triggering. Then we have something similar, which is Horn of Heaven. We have better cards in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Which kind of replace this one. But this one is, you tribute 1 monster on your side of the field, negate the normal summon, flip summon, special summon of a monster, and destroy it. So this will actually just stop the monster from hitting the field completely. And of course, if you have to tribute a monster, you're probably going to want to tribute a Scapegoat, maybe a like any token monster, maybe a Sangan, you know, something you don't need to actually completely outright stop a monster from hitting the field. This could even stop Jinzo because it's a counter trap, so he won't even hit the field to start negating your traps. Interesting card. I've tried to play this a little bit. You know, you can negate certain things, but it's going to do nothing. Like, you're not going to want to activate it against say a card that's just basic, say a vanilla monster or something, unless that card's going to actually kill you or you know, spoil your plans. But you know, the cost is pretty hefty there. Then we got Royal Oppression. Now I remember when this card was big, people played this in threes sometimes, and this was back when you know, it was regular tournaments and regular Yu-Gi-Oh, not GOAT format. But there's a reason why this card got pretty much banned, is it's just a little bit too powerful. But in GOAT format, I don't think it's as powerful because there's a lot of normal summoning going on. So this one, you pay 800 life points to negate a special summon of a monster, and the effect of that card is or the effect of a card that special summons the monster and destroy it. I think that's what separates this from this one, is this won't stop a card that's like Premature Burial, because it doesn't stop a card that summons a monster, it stops the monster. Whereas this actually can stop Call of the Haunted, Premature Burial, any like the monster effects that special summon themselves, at the cost of 800 life points. And this is not a counter trap. This is actually a continuous trap. Problem is, I think while this is up on the field, any player can use it. As far as I remember, it's been a long time since I actually looked at this card, and I was considering it like for a GOAT format, but you really are limited to the amount of special summons that are actually happening during a regular GOAT format match. So, you know, again, it might just be a good side card just to stop the, you know, crazy shenanigans of monster gate and reasoning and, you know, things like that. But still a good card. Then we can actually outright negate an attack. Now, this is interesting because this is a counter trap, kind of counter trap version of, say, Threatening Roar and Wabaku, in that it actually just negates an attack of the monster and then ends their battle phase. Really cool because it's a counter trap. Your opponent can't kind of activate another trap in response to it. Like, for instance, if they go to attack, if they're going to attack and then you activate this, they can't chain to this unless it's another counter trap. So, I mean, I guess it does work, but I don't see people playing it beyond things like Exodia decks or things where you want to stall. Then we also have Judgment of Anubis. This is a card that I've tried to make work in the past. I still haven't had much success with it, but the effect is really good. I mean, you discard one card from your hand, just like Magic Jammer, and then negate the activation and effect of a spell card controlled by your opponent that includes the effect of destroying spell or trap cards on the field, and destroy it. Then you can destroy one face-up monster your opponent's side of the field and inflict damage equal to the attack of the destroyed monster. So, I mean, in theory, this sounds like it's a better Magic Jammer, in that it only negates spells that destroy spell or traps on the field. So it's going to stop your Heavy Storms, it's going to stop the Mystical Space Typhoons, you know, anything that's going to destroy your spell and trap. So really only good in a stall type deck as well, where you have a lot of face downs or a lot of continuous traps or spell cards face up on the field that your opponent is going to try and destroy. And this could be a nice surprise that will actually not only stop their card, but wipe out one of their monsters and damage them at the same time. So discarding for this card, it kind of is worth it. And the last one I just wanted to show is another continuous trap, Royal Command. This one is not really that interesting. You negate the activation and effects of all flip effect monsters on the field, basically. So when you attack into that Magician of Faith, it's not going to do anything. Again, kind of a limited card because, you know, you're not going to want to, it's not always going to go off. Your opponent's going to know it's there. They're not going to set their monsters if this is face up on the field anyways. So, I mean, in some cases it could be a surprise where you set it and then your opponent sets their Magician of Faith or Dekochi or whatever, and then during your turn you activate it and then attack into it just to stop their effect. I guess it's a good side card, probably one that would be used in a side deck. Maybe a main deck if you really think you're going to be going up against a lot of, you know, chaos decks that set a lot of monsters. Anyways, those were the cards that I was thinking about for, these are like kind of great choices for negation traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! GOAT format. If I missed any, throw some down in the comments below. I'm sure there's a few I might have skipped out on. There's some that are just very specific cards that only work with very specific monsters. And so I didn't want to just like add those ones in there. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Hope you subscribe. Talk to you later.